The Snow White Pigeon. Once upon a time, there was a little girl called Isabel. She was very fond of birds and animals, but she hadn't any of her own, not even a tortoise. So she made the wild birds her pets and fed them every day, putting the crumbs and scraps on an old tree stump in the garden. One day, a snow-white pigeon flew down to feed with the other birds. Isabel was surprised. "Look, Mummy," she said, "there's a fan-tailed pigeon. See its beautiful fan-like tail? I wonder where it has come from. I do wish I could have one for my own." But Isabel's mother was very poor, and she could not even afford the few pence for corn that the pigeon would have to eat. "We have no money for pets," she said. "Pigeons eat corn, Isabel. That one which flew down to feed is not eating anything. It just flew down to see if there was any seed or corn there. But now that it finds none, it will fly away." The pigeon would have flown away, but suddenly something dreadful happened. The next door cat came creeping along and jumped out at the poor white pigeon. "Oh, oh," screamed Isabel in a fright, and she rushed out at once. She scared away the cat and ran to lift up the hurt pigeon. One of its wings had been hurt and it could not fly. It was very frightened and its ruby-red eyes were shut. Isabel gently carried the pigeon to her mother. "It will be all right in a day or two," said her mother. "It must be kept in a cage until it can fly again, or the cat will get it once more." "I haven't a cage," said Isabel, frowning. Then she cheered up. "But, Mummy, what about the old rabbit hutch in the shed? Would that do?" "Yes, if you can clean it out," said her mother. "You can easily keep the pigeon there for a little while. We must find out whom it belongs to, and they can have their pigeon back when its wing is better." So Isabel cleaned out the old rabbit hutch and mended the wire in front with string. Then she set it by the dining room window. She gently placed the hurt pigeon into the old hutch. Her mother had washed its wing, and the pigeon had its eyes open now. It was still frightened, but it did not mind Isabel's gentle hands. It knew that the little girl loved it. "Mummy, what shall I feed it on?" asked Isabel. "I haven't a penny for some corn." "Run down to the farmer's wife and see if she wants any errands done," said her mother. "Maybe she would give you a handful of corn if you help her a bit." So off went Isabel and asked Mrs. Straw if there was any work she can do. "Yes," said Mrs. Straw at once. "You can wash all the eggs for me, ready for market. I haven't time this morning. Mind you, don't break any." Isabel washed nearly 100 eggs and didn't break a single one. Mrs. Straw was pleased. "You can have 3 eggs to take home," she said. But Isabel looked at her shyly. "Do you think I might have a handful of corn instead?" she asked. "I have a hurt pigeon and I have no food for it." "Bless the child. Of course you can take the corn," said Mrs. Straw, and she bustled off to see to her baking. Isabel ran to the corn bin and took a handful. Then, holding it in her overall so that she wouldn't waste a grain, she went slowly back home. The pigeon was simply delighted with the corn, for it was very hungry. Rookity-coo," it said to Isabel, and pecked up the corn as quickly as it could. By the morning, there was no corn left. "I have to go and do a few more jobs for Mrs. Straw," said Isabel. "Then perhaps she will give me some more corn. So off she went. Mrs. Straw was pleased to see her, for the little girl was a good worker. "Good morning," she said. "You are just in time. I have 6 baby lambs in the farm garden that I am bringing up by hand. Will you feed all the lambs from these baby bottles one by one?" Well, wasn't that a lovely job to do? Isabel was delighted. Mrs. Straw heated the milk in a big saucepan on the oil stove, and then she filled the bottles. Isabel made them cooler for the lambs and then went out to feed them. The long-legged creatures came frisking up to her, greedy and hungry. One by one, she fed them, putting the teat of the bottle into their mouths and letting them suck out the lovely warm milk. "This is a lovely thing to do," sighed Isabel happily. "Dear little lambs, I can't believe you grow into those fat old sheep." Mrs. Straw was pleased with Isabel for helping her again. "Take 6 apples home for yourself," she said. "There are some in the storeroom." Isabel would have dearly liked the apples, but she wanted some corn for the pigeon. Mrs. Straw nodded and said yes, she could take another handful if she liked. So Isabel took home another handful and fed the hungry pigeon. She looked into the hutch where the pigeon was comfortably sitting on the hay. When the pigeon walked over to the corn, Isabel saw something on the hay. "It's an egg," she cried. "A pretty white egg. The pigeon has laid it. Oh, I wonder if a baby pigeon will come out of it." She ran to tell her mother. Her mother was so surprised. "Well, well," she said, "who would have thought of that?" "I do wonder who the pigeon belongs to," said Isabel. "They will be surprised to know that it has laid an egg." "I have found out who the owner is," said her mother. "It is Miss Kennedy down the lane. She has lost one. You can go and tell her, if you like, that you have her pigeon safely." So off went Isabel and saw Miss Kennedy, who was a very kind lady indeed, just as fond of birds and animals as Isabel was. "A cat hurt your pigeon," said Isabel, "so I put it into an old hutch and looked after it. I hadn't any pennies to buy corn, so I did some jobs for Mrs. Straw. She let me have some corn for the pigeon, and now it has laid an egg." "Well, you have been a kind little friend to my hurt pigeon," said Miss Kennedy. "Will you keep it for me until the egg has hatched and the baby is old enough to look after itself? Perhaps you would like to keep the baby and have it for your own pigeon. I can always give you some of my corn for it." Isabel was so delighted that she could hardly say thank you. To have a pigeon of her very own, one that she had had from an egg, it was too lovely for anything. She raced back to tell the good news to her mother. She would be pleased too, because she knew how much Isabel would love a pet of her own. The pigeon sat day after day on its white egg, its wing healed, but Isabel did not let it fly out in case the cat got it again. Not until the egg was hatched and the strange little baby was old enough to see to itself did she open the hutch and let the mother pigeon fly back to Miss Kennedy's pigeon house. But the baby pigeon always stayed with Isabel and grew big and white and beautiful like its mother. It had a wonderful fan tail that it spread out when it walked. It said, "Rookity-coo, rookity-coo," to Isabel whenever it saw her. She has the pigeon still, and guess what she has called it? I wonder if you guessed right. Well, she called it Snow White. Thank you.